2024 probably is one of the hardest years that I've had in a really long time, but I'm so incredibly grateful for how God carried my family through, and I'm thankful that even though I didn't quite hit my goal of 50 books, I still had plenty of time to enjoy reading instead of becoming addicted to the hustle culture again. So that is definitely a win. Are you struggling with the pain of a past abortion and longing for help but don't know where to turn? Welcome to the Does God Forgive Abortion podcast. I'm Brittany, an abortion recovery and mental health coach who went from feeling completely isolated and desperate in my post-abortion grief to achieving wholeness and freedom, all because of redemption in Christ. If you are ready to break free from the chains of shame and guilt from a past decision of abortion, you are in the right place. Let's crack open that Bible because it's time to receive the good news. It's been a long time since we've had a book discussion on the podcast. When I first started this show, I'm going to be honest, I had no real idea what I was doing. I had someone recently tell me that they listened to the first episode of the show and appreciated it and were planning on listening to the rest of my episodes. And while I definitely think that there are many helpful episodes, like how are we almost at 200 episodes? It just blows my mind. But while I know that many are helpful, I still kind of cringed because at the beginning of this journey, I definitely had quite a few misses. I'm going to be real honest about that. And we've come a long way. Seriously, we have come a long way, my friends. And I feel like we've kind of grown up a bit together over the last couple of years. It's been just a beautiful journey. But sometimes I think it's nice to have kind of a break-ish from so much abortion content. So I thought we'd kind of come back and we'd talk about one of my favorite things today, which is books. And don't worry, I will still keep it relevant by giving you a quick list at the end of my 5 favorite books that can help you on your healing after abortion journey. So this year, I set a goal to read 50 books, and I actually had a stretch goal of 60 books. And then life happened. I've shared on some previous episodes about how hard the first half of this year really was for us. My little family was so sick constantly, especially the first 6 months of this year. My husband missed more days of teaching school last school year than he has any other year of his 9 years of teaching so far. So it was definitely rough, and there were many times that I wondered if we were being taught some sort of lesson, and I'm sure we were, and I know that God works all things for his good. But we had a pretty stressful summer too, with lots of medical visits and issues, and quite honestly, I just really didn't get much reading done this year. 2024 probably is one of the hardest years that I've had in a really long time, but I'm so incredibly grateful for how God carried my family through, and I'm thankful that even though I didn't quite hit my goal of 50 books, I still had plenty of time to enjoy reading instead of becoming addicted to the hustle culture again. So that is definitely a win. I'm really doing my best to stay far away from the hustle culture that I was in a few years ago. Anyone else feel me on that? It is not a good place to be. So I want to ask you, what about you? Do you like to read? Do you love books? If you do, I would love to invite you to be my friend on Goodreads. It is an amazing little social networking app for book readers, and you can search for books and rate books. It's so fun. So you should be my friend on there. You can search my name, Brittany Poppy. You should recognize me by my profile picture. I've got like a huge yellow water jug in my picture. Or you can follow the link that's in the show notes. I'll link my Goodreads profile in the show notes, and let's be friends and nerd out over books together this year. So go ahead and join me on there. Okay, so for this episode, I'm going to kind of split this up into about 4 different lists for you. And please do not run away. I promise I won't like make this episode super long or anything, but I'm going to give you my top 10 favorite books that I read this year, my 5 least favorite books that I read this year, 2 books that I'm starting off 2025 with, and we're going to end with my 5 favorite books that you can take with you on your abortion healing journey. So, super fun, right? I also will have a blog post that will go along with this episode. I don't know if you've noticed, but I have been blogging on the website each episode. So, if you want the links to any of these books, or you can go in Goodreads and search them, but if you want a list with links, I will have that in the blog. So, super excited. Okay, here we go. We're going to start with my top 10 favorite books, and these aren't really in any particular order. I'm just kind of talking about them as I looked at my Goodreads list. So it kind of is in order of like when I read them and finished them. And so we're going to go ahead and look at the top 10. Now, I kind of cheated a little bit because there are a couple of books where I kind of rope in maybe all in a series or all by the author. So just take that with a grain of salt. But, it's just too hard, right? It's hard to narrow all of them down. So the first book that I put on this list, which again, kind of cheating here a little bit, but The Housemaid is Watching. I actually read all 3 of the Housemaid books by Frida McFadden. So good. So good. I loved these books. I definitely want to read more of her books. I haven't yet, but I definitely want to. And I did see she also had a little short novella of The Housemaid. I think The Housemaid's Wedding. I haven't read that yet, but I love the Housemaid series and it was so good and I highly recommend it. I would say it's probably like PG-13. There's no real crazy intimate scenes in it, which I appreciate. I just don't really like to read books like that personally. And so it was really good. I loved it. Loved all 3 of those books. Okay, the second book on my list is Confessions of a Crappy Christian by Blake Guichet, or you may know her as The Girl Named Blake. I am guessing a lot of you know who she is. So she has a podcast by the same name, Confessions of a Crappy Christian. And if you didn't know this, I actually was able to be a guest on her podcast in September. It was such an amazing honor to have been considered for her podcast because she's a pretty huge podcaster. And I was so grateful that she was willing to have the conversation about abortion on her show. So I'm going to link actually that episode in the show notes too, in case you want to give that a listen. But go and read her book. It was so good. I absolutely loved it. I just love how she shares the gospel in such a real way. So definitely a huge thumbs up on that book. Okay, I'm cheating here again. So I read Worst Case Scenario by TJ Newman. I actually read her other 2 novels as well, called Drowning and Falling. Now, all of these books are kind of written around an airplane. She is a former flight attendant. Now, fun fact, I am actually terrified of flying. So I don't know why I read these books because there are some kind of dicey situations on airplanes in all 3 of these books. And so I loved all of them though. I loved them so much and I already am just chomping at the bit. I want her to write another one so I can read it. But Worst Case Scenario was really good. It actually kind of was about what if an airplane crashes into a nuclear power plant? Crazy stuff. So good. I recommend all 3 of her books if you kind of on the edge of your seat thriller type books. And again, there wasn't a bunch of intimate graphic stuff in the books. Some of the injuries I guess can maybe be a little graphic, so just use caution there. But again, I would probably say this is a PG-13 book. Very, very good. Okay, I also read this book called The Last Flight. So this is the 4th book on our 10 list. The Last Flight. It is an amazing book, and I don't have the author written down here. Whoops, hold on one second. Okay, I pulled it up. The author is Julie Clark. So The Last Flight by Julie Clark. Super good book. Again, not crazy inappropriate things in this book. It's definitely kind of a mystery thriller. There's a lot of questions and they do get answered at the end. And it follows two women who are trying to escape certain things in their life, and they switch plane tickets. And so, our boarding passes, really. So really super good. Again, like clean, not anything crazy dirty in it. Loved it. Okay, the next book on my list is Hillbilly Elegy by Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. This was a really good book. I listened to the audio version. I tried reading it, the hardcover version, and I struggle a little bit with nonfiction if I'm having to read it. Like, I get really distracted. And so someone actually suggested to me to listen to the audiobook, and I loved it. Now, language, lots of language in this book, but I loved just getting really a look at what life was like for him growing up. I think it's just a really like kind of real, honest memoir. It was so good. And I love that we are having people in places of like positions of power, like political office, that really know what real life is like for real Americans. So definitely, I loved the audio. I think it was great. But again, just a caution, there is definitely some language and crass comments in there. But he's pretty upfront about that in the beginning. So super good book. Okay, the next book on the list, A Flicker in the Dark by Stacy Willingham. Wow, this one was so good. So it's about a woman who is a psychologist, and her dad is actually a convicted serial killer. And then all of a sudden, murders start happening around her that mimic the murders that her dad committed, but he's in prison. And so it's kind of like a thriller. And again, nothing super crazy graphic in this. I would say PG-13. Definitely a really good book. I really enjoyed it. And I read this one after a stretch of some duds that I was just like, ugh. So it was a breath of fresh air. I really enjoyed it. Okay, next book on the list, another kind of nonfiction. So this one was For Love of Country by Tulsi Gabbard. So again, I listened to this one on audiobook, and it was so good. I just love Tulsi so much. And while I don't agree with her on everything politically, I absolutely loved reading her book, or listening really to her book. She reads it just like JD read his, and she talks about a ton of things and how she's basically like excommunicated by political elites. And she talks a lot about her relationship with Donald Trump, and they're working together. And she even kind of mentions the emergency broadcast thing that happened in Hawaii about the missile. I don't know if you guys remember hearing about that in the news, but she talks about the devastation with that. It's just a really, really great book. So I would encourage you, again, like listen to it. It was so good. I really love her. I think she's an amazing person, and I'm excited to see what she does in the new administration's cabinet. I really pray that that Congress confirms her. I think she fully deserves it, and she's just an amazing human being. Okay, next up. So again, I'm kind of cheating here, but this year I read 2 Kristen Hanna books. So these were the second and third books by her that I've read. I read The Great Alone, I believe in 2023. That one, so good. These were even better. I read The Women and The Nightingale. The Women is about the Vietnam War and the women that were there. If you've been listening a while, you know that my dad actually was a Vietnam veteran. He was a combat veteran in the Army, and had a lot of stories about his time over there. It was really devastating, and he really struggled a lot with PTSD, and the Agent Orange exposure is actually what eventually killed him. And she talks about those things, and it was just an amazing book. And I didn't know so much about the women that were over there, and I just absolutely loved getting to read about that and that history. And I finished that book and was not emotionally stable for like a whole week after. So you're probably listening to this and you're like, why would you suggest reading that? It was in a good way. And I think it hit me so much emotionally because I was reading about places that I knew my dad had been, and it was just really, really, really good. So I highly recommend it. That's probably actually the top of my favorite books. I should have probably saved that one for last. I think that was my absolute favorite that I read, along with The Nightingale, which is about World War II and when the Nazis took over France. And wow. That one is so good. That one came out a few years ago, so some of you maybe have read it. I think The Women came out this year, but those were some amazing books. The Nightingale definitely had me needing some tissues also. She is just such a compelling author, and I look forward to reading more of her books, hopefully this year. Okay, I have 2 more books on this list to share with you. So in my top 10, so these are like my favorite books I've read this year. So the second to the last would be Middle of the Night by Riley Sager. One thing I will say, I don't think this was my favorite out of all of his. I've read all of his books at this point. He is a thriller, kind of mystery, like horror author. Maybe I shouldn't use the word horror because I don't think it's really, like, his writing isn't necessarily like crazy overly graphic or anything like that. But, so good. I really enjoyed Middle of the Night. So it was one of my favorite books I read this year, but I wouldn't say it's one of my favorite ones of his, if that makes sense, since I've read all of his. Definitely recommend reading it. So good. I am certain I saw him advertising that he has another book coming out in 2025. So I cannot wait to read that one because it's gonna be good. But yeah, super, super good. Okay. The last book I'm going to share with you on my top 10 list is Soul Repair by Jeff Van Vonderen. I probably butchered his last name. This one is a Christian book. It's really about repairing your soul after spiritual abuse. Now, I don't really think, like, I wouldn't have looked at myself as someone who's experienced spiritual abuse or like a lot of church hurt necessarily in my past, but I think so many of us have experienced even some amounts of spiritual abuse by other Christians because we are so imperfect, right? We're trying to share the gospel with others, but we are just not perfect at doing that. And I think we've actually probably spiritually abused other people without even realizing it. And that's not me trying to like virtue signal or anything like that. That's really like, it's a really kind of eye-opening book. And so I encourage you to read it, to kind of like really get a good view of who God truly is and, you know, how much he loves us and how he really does lead with love and mercy. And it's not so much about legalism and, you know, you have to spend an hour here reading the Bible or you're not a good enough Christian. It is such a good book. So Soul Repair by Jeff Van Vonderen. So good. If I had to go ahead and take a guess, the pain and anxiety that you are feeling on a regular basis is probably affecting your everyday life. When you think about sitting with your abortion or abortions face to face, all you want to do is run far away. It is just too much, and you don't see how God could ever redeem you. You don't see how you could ever feel safe in church or with other believers because what you've done in your mind is just too dirty. You made the choice. Now you have to live with it, and you feel no hope. I want you to know that there is hope, that you are not alone in this, and that God truly has never left you, not even for a second. God has heard you every time that you've cried out to him. He has bottled up every single tear that you have shed, and he is waiting with his arms wide open for you to run and surrender to him. Now, if this is you, if you're listening to this and you're saying, hey, that is me, I need help, I don't want to live like this anymore, then I want you to make a commitment right now to say yes. Today is a day that you are finally going to partner with God and work on healing your heart. I want you to go right now to brittanypoppy.com/coaching and schedule your first one-on-one call with me. And I want you to do this because we are going to do this together. I am going to be right beside you the whole time as we uncover the areas of your life that need this peace that only God can give you. So get ready, because here we go. That's it for my top 10 list. We're going to quick segue into my 5 least favorite books. And there's a theme here because I think I just need to stop reading books by some of these authors. So the first book on my least favorite books list is actually The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. This was the 4th time I've tried reading this book, and I did finally finish it, but I've tried reading it so many times where I just haven't finished it. It was just so slow moving for me. I mean, I didn't regret reading it necessarily, but it wasn't my favorite. So I don't know. Maybe I'll try another Ruth Ware book because I know a lot of people really love her writing, and that's the only one I've read, I think, so far. So maybe I'll give her another shot. But yeah, it just didn't really hit for me. The second of my least favorite books was called The Writing Retreat by Julia Bartz. I just really didn't like this one. There was a lot of inappropriate content that I just wasn't a fan of, but I have this weird thing where if I start a book, I just really want to finish it, and I think that's why I made myself finish The Woman in Cabin 10 this year. So I finished it. It wasn't great. I wouldn't recommend it personally. It's about these people that go on this writing retreat, and it does end up being kind of like a thriller mystery type thing. Yeah, kind of a dud. Go read about it on Goodreads before you pick it up. This next one on my least favorite list, called The Midnight Feast by Lucy Foley. This is the second book I've read by Lucy Foley, and I just didn't like either one of them. So I probably just won't read any more of her books. It just was not great. There was a lot of witchcraft in it too. And so definitely if that's something that you've struggled with in the past, kind of feeling like you're allowing the evil kind of spiritual forces to kind of creep into your life by reading books like that, don't read this one. I felt like I was mature enough in my faith to where I could finish it. And yeah, I just won't be reading another one of her books again, probably. It just wasn't great. Then the last 2 books on my least favorite books list are actually both by author Geneva Rose. So the first one, You Shouldn't Have Come Here, kind of the same thing, just some inappropriate content. I felt like, I don't know, I didn't feel good after it was over. I just felt like, I didn't really like this. And then I'd actually read The Perfect Marriage by her before I read You Shouldn't Have Come Here. So You Shouldn't Have Come Here was my second chance for her. But The Perfect Marriage, I actually did kind of like it at first. The ending really ruined it for me. It was just, I didn't feel good when it was over. And so I probably just won't pick up another book from her again. And I know she's a very popular author, and I'm not begrudging her or disparaging her or any of these authors. I'm not their target reader. I just didn't enjoy them. So those are my 5 least favorite books. Okay, 2 books that I am starting 2025 with. So excited. So I really wanted to actually read these in 2024, but I just didn't get to them. So I'm starting with them in 2025 because I'm actually going to be going to an event in January that they are speaking at, and I want to have read their books before I go. So the first one is The 1916 Project by Seth Gruber. You can actually watch a documentary based on this book on X for free, and it is all about the origins of the abortion industry and Planned Parenthood's patron saint, Margaret Sanger. And this documentary is not super graphic, but it will definitely alarm you as to the origins of feminism and everything that has gone on. It is mind-blowing. So watch documentary. I will give a report on the book once I've finished it. My goal is to finish it within the first week or so of January. But I cannot wait to read it and share it with you. The second book that I'm starting 2025 with is Toxic Empathy by Allie Beth Stuckey. I love her. she is so awesome. She is someone I truly look up to in the podcasting space. Her podcast is called Relatable, if you are interested in listening to her podcast, and it's just so good. And she is super passionate about the issue of life. And I've read her other book actually called You Are Not Enough and That's Okay. And that one is a really good biblical book. So definitely go ahead and read that one. But toxic empathy is really relevant to kind of what we've got going on in like this political space, where one side is telling us that we have to be so empathetic and affirming to things that really kind of are just delusions. And the first lie, I believe, in her book is that abortion is healthcare. And we talk about, or she talks about rather, I don't talk about anything. I'm just going to read her book. But she talks about that, how that is such a lie, and how really to how to kind of combat the fact that progressives are exploiting Christian compassion. And so I'll definitely give a report on her book once I'm done reading that too. But her and Seth are actually speaking at Life or Death Con in Washington, D.C., which I will be going to. It's the day before the March for Life, which I'm also going to for the first time. So excited. Definitely will give you a full report. And they are going to be speaking there. And I just can't wait. I'm so excited. Okay. Last quick list that I want to leave you with, because I do want to keep the content relevant to what we talk about on the podcast. So I want to leave you with 5 books to take with you for abortion healing. Now, I haven't read all of these books this year. Some of these books I read a while ago, but they're just so tried and true and really great. So Her Choice to Heal. Super amazing book. I've given this one away actually in our Facebook group when we've done giveaways before. It is an amazing book. So many women have found it so helpful and really motivating and encouraging when you are thinking about starting a healing journey. Then we've also got the book called Changed. This book is really great. There are a ton of stories of people who've been affected by abortion, and they can be really comforting. So there's stories from women who've had abortions, there's stories from men who've been involved in abortions, other family members, friends, abortion workers. It's just a really, really great resource if you are just really wanting to not feel alone anymore. The third book that's a really great book to take with you in abortion healing is called Cradle My Heart. This one's by Kim Katola. Again, just such a really great, amazing book. This woman, I've had the opportunity to see her speak at an event, and she is just an amazing individual that has been positioned by God. And she is also someone who has had an abortion. And so she writes from a perspective of knowing exactly what we've gone through. And so I highly encourage you to read her book. Again, this is also a book I've given away in the Facebook group before. Such a great book. The fourth book on the list is called Forgiven and Set Free. Now, if you want to go through this in a group of women, you should definitely contact me. We do virtual studies, and I also partner with another organization that does retreats alongside this Bible study. Now, can you do it by yourself? Yeah, but I don't encourage that. I encourage you to do it at least with one other person, if not in a group. It's just going to be so much more beneficial and helpful to you if you have that accountability. And then the last book, I actually did read this book this year. This one was gifted to me by the author when I was at a speaking event, and it's called Heaven's Nursery by Phil Salmon. And it's about a woman who, abortion is a very big topic in this book, and it's about a young woman, really honestly a young girl, who is kidnapped into human trafficking. And it's just so compelling and really great. And he is an independent author. He's self-published, so it's not a hugely widely known book. You can find it on Goodreads, but I definitely recommend it as kind of like a book full of hope. And this one, the other books that I mentioned in my 5 books to take with you for abortion healing are more kind of self-help, for lack of a better term, kind of, that Christian help kind of book. Whereas this book is actually a fiction book. It's a fiction story that he wrote. I think he used some real people for some inspiration, and he is just a really great individual. So recommend his book. Okay, that is it for our book episode. I hope that you enjoyed this. And I don't know. If we should talk about books more, then let me know, because we totally can. But again, don't forget to friend me on Goodreads so that I can see what you are reading and you can continue to see what I'm reading. And we can see each other's ratings and all that stuff. It is just so super fun. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have a chance, I would love to know what you're going to read this year. So feel free to follow me on Instagram or send me a DM on there with what you plan to read in 2025. Dear Heavenly Father, I pray that this episode blessed the listeners today. I pray that they have taken away some books to read this year. Lord, I pray that they will just lean on you to guide them to their healing journey, no matter what that looks like for them. Lord, I just pray that 2025 is going to be the year that they seek you and the healing that you have for them. And Lord, I just pray that we can continue to grow through reading. I pray that you will lead us to read books that will help us grow in our relationship with you. And I just thank you for being so good and for giving us so many ways to just enjoy this life that you have given us. In Jesus' name, amen. Hey, beautiful friend, I hope that you found comfort from today's episode. If so, would you consider leaving a review wherever you are listening? It truly encourages me to know that this podcast has been helping you. Also, I want to remind you that we are here for you. If you would like to connect with a community of women healing from the past decision of abortion, please join us in our private Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/Christian women healing from abortion. Please know that I continue to pray for you every day, and I am so thankful for you. I will meet you back in a few days for a brand new episode, but until then, take care and God bless.